Hello, and welcome to Nightcast. My name is Jonathan Reyes, Senior Vice President for Communications and Strategic Partnerships. And I'll be your host from here at our set at the St. John Paul II National Shrine in Washington, D.C. We hope to keep you informed and help you live as Knights by sharing stories of Knights in action throughout the world, letting you know about the latest work of the Order, and helping you grow in your faith. The series is a free, exclusive benefit of Knights of Columbus membership. And if you'd like to register to get future episodes, simply go to kfc.org/Nightcast. In this episode, we'll talk to our Supreme Knight on the year of St. Joseph, learn how the miraculous healing of an unborn child led to Father McGivney's beatification, look at how some enterprising college Knights helped revive the faith on their campus by constructing an ice chapel, and much more. During this ongoing pandemic, the Archbishop of Manaus, Brazil, issued an urgent plea. For the love of God, send us oxygen. The Knights of Columbus did just that, donating much-needed medical oxygen to treat COVID-19 patients in Brazil and Peru. Bishop Giovanni Cefai expressed the magnitude of the importance of this project when he said, "Even if we save just one life, it is worth it. Imagine that we will be saving hundreds of lives."
Questi giorni la mia preghiera va a quanti soffrono per la pandemia, specialmente a Manaus, nel nord del Brasile.
Nós tivemos primeiro momento, chamado a primeira onda, em que a grande dificuldade foram os internamentos e as UTIs. No segundo momento, mas também faltou oxigênio. Nós tivemos um número razoável de pessoas que vieram a óbito estando na UTI, por falta de oxigênio. Isso é grave.
E a gente ficou um pouco desesperado, porque a gente não tinha mais controle. Então, a ajuda de oxigênio, a ajuda de equipamentos foi de grande importância para salvar a vida.
Deus não nos abandonou. Começamos a receber a ajuda dos cavaleiros de Colombo. Deus, através desse oxigênio doado, soprou vida para muitas pessoas aqui no nosso estado do Amazonas.
Se ha visto durante esta pandemia que la oxigenoterapia es un tratamiento vital para poder sostener a los pacientes críticos.
Me preocupé por mi mami, que también es persona vulnerable. Luego ya necesitó mi mami oxígeno, así que tuvimos que trasladarle al hospital. Mi mami hubiese tenido que descansar, pero ahora está bien, gracias al concentrador. Se está recuperando satisfactoriamente. Agradecer a los caballeros de Colón por haber tenido esta amabilidad de donar a nuestro pueblo, a nuestra comunidad de Huancané.
Dios prefiere a ti, a mí, a toda la humanidad, a venir juntos como está haciendo esta pandemia, haciéndonos más cerca y más sensibles uno hacia el otro. El Señor nos pone ángeles, como son los caballeros de Colón, que gracias a Dios, con que nos han ayudado, son miles de dólares. Y realmente nosotros, en su nombre, vamos a hacerlo llegar a varios centros de salud, acá en la prelatura de Santiago Apóstol, Huancané.
Deus abençoe a vocês. Deus abençoe a solidariedade. Deus abençoe a caridade. A caridade é o amor em movimento. Deus abençoe e do fundo do coração, muito obrigado.
I'm now joined by our new Supreme Knight, Patrick Kelly. Thank you for your time, Mr. Kelly. It's good to be with you.
Thanks, Jonathan. It's great to be here.
Glad you could join us. So you've been at this for 2 weeks now. You should know everything by now. How's it been? How's the first 2 weeks gone?
Well, I would say the first 2 weeks have been a very inspiring time. I've made it my business to start my conversations with state deputies. So I'm doing these one-on-one conversations, listening and talking with them. It's been truly inspiring to see the commitment that these men have. It's something I've always known, but I've really been reminded of it.
What kind of things are you hearing out there? Are you?
Well, I'm hearing about how they're adapting to the COVID environment. They've made great strides with continuing programs amid COVID, and just persevering through that. And then I think we're all waiting for COVID to get behind us so we can get back in action.
What does it look like for us to get back from COVID? What are you hoping to see happen? How do we do that?
Yeah, first and foremost, we're going to have to obviously get beyond COVID, and what that's going to mean is that we have to get our councils back in action. Like I said, we've been doing good under the circumstances, but post-COVID, we need to get our councils back in action, and I think our councils can play a role in getting our parishes up and running again, right? Getting our parishes and helping our pastors get parishioners back in the pews. I think our councils can do that through dialogue with our pastors. So I think there's a unique role for us. Then, of course, post-COVID, we're going to continue with our extraordinary charitable work, which is renowned, and also with continuing protecting families through our insurance program.
You know, it's an open question how many people are going to come back to Mass after COVID, but I've been thinking, an order of 2 million people worldwide, we're in thousands and thousands of parishes. It strikes me we're uniquely positioned to help a pastor by inviting people back, maybe making phone calls, maybe passing flyers. Is this the kind of thing you're thinking about for us to do?
We're doing a lot of thinking about that. What concretely does that look like? And I think in coming weeks we will be able to talk more about that. But yeah, we've always been the strong right arm of the church, but I think even more than that, we've been the strong right arm of our pastors, and I think we need to be there for our pastors. And I would say thinking with him about how the council can help him get his people back in the pews.
Great, so you've been in the seat for 2 weeks, so I don't want to get ahead of you, but I do want to ask, where are we going? Everyone's asking you this. You and I have sat through some interviews you've done, and everyone wants to know what's coming for the Knights. So how have you been answering that question? What do you see, at least at this point?
There's so many things that we do. We're such a broad, diverse organization. So it's hard to say any one particular thing. But I would say what's next is this. And it's not something new. It's something we've always done. But it's an emphasis on the family. And I think that the Catholic man who is raising his family today in this culture is struggling. It's a very hard culture to do two things: to keep your marriage together and keep your marriage in a good place, and to raise children in the faith and keep them Catholic. Okay, we all know this. It's a very hard culture for that. And I think the Knights of Columbus have tools to help that man. It's not something that I don't know about. My wife and I, we have 3 young children, and we think about this all the time. We talk about it all the time, about our children. What kind of world are they going to grow up in? Who are their friends? Who will their friends be? The influences on them that will affect their faith life. So it's a very, very important question, I think, for all Catholic parents. It's one of the reasons why last year we did the Into the Breach program, and which showed men what a healthy Catholic masculine approach to life and to marriage is. And I think, well, I know in the future what we're going to be doing is a very similar program that is going to focus on marriage and family to give our Knights of Columbus men and our Knights of Columbus families the tools that they need to really keep their families intact and healthy.
You keep talking about tools, and I think this is important because one of the things that worked about Into the Breach, and I think part of why it was so successful, is it laid out a vision, but it also was very practical. And this is what we're hoping to build into a marriage and family program as well, combine sort of a vision for a life as a married man and as a family, and then just get down to brass tacks. This is things you can do in your home, ways to go at this issue.
It has to be that way. I mean, we can talk theoretically about marriage, and we can read the theology of marriage, and it's very beautiful. But on a day-to-day level, there are practical things you can do to keep your marriage in a good place. You can have a date night. You can work on communication. There's a lot of things that you can do. So yeah, it will be much more than just the theory. It will go down into the brass tacks of what that looks like in a day-to-day marriage.
So as we move forward, these are some initiatives. What are some of the challenges we face? What things are going to be, what keeps you up at night?
I think one of our biggest challenges is membership. And we've talked about this a lot, and I don't mean membership in terms of just pursuing numbers for numbers' sake. What I mean is showing a new generation of men the value of the Knights of Columbus and what that means, what it means to be to live a life in service to others and in service to the church, to really be men for others. Ultimately, that's what the Knights are about. It's about this model of servant leadership, which we get from Jesus Christ himself. So showing a younger generation, a new generation, the meaning and the value of that. To me, I think it's a big challenge, and we all have to work on that because we all know what the Knights are. We love the Knights of Columbus, but many younger men haven't had that experience, so we need to reach them where they are and show them the value of membership.
You know, I think two things that might be attractive, and I wonder what you think about this for a young man, is the Knights of Columbus help with identity because they bring a man into relationship with Christ in a deeper way, relationship to the church, and they help stamp on a person certain values, charity, unity, fraternity, right? They're shaping you. And the other thing I think is attractive is friendship. So these are the two things I think could be very attractive from the work I've done with young people. Is that how you're thinking about it?
I do think that way. That is what attracted me to the Knights of Columbus in the very beginning. I was a sophomore in college. I knew about the Knights of Columbus because of my family, my father and my grandfather were Knights. But it was the friendships that I had, and it was that brotherhood, being with a band of brothers, right? And being with men who shared my values and my faith. There's the passage from Proverbs, iron sharpens iron. And that is what brought me into the Knights of Columbus. So I think that value of friendship, I think men want that, and men need that. Families need that.
So that's one challenge. We want to make sure that young men see the good that we offer so that they come and join us. And that allows us to do even more of the good we're doing and affect the church. Any other challenges that you see ahead of us?
I think a major challenge is religious freedom. I think that is going to be a big challenge for the church. I think we live in a culture that doesn't value religious freedom the way it used to. And so I think we're going to need to be vigilant about that. I think everyone is aware that there are currents in our culture that want us to keep our faith private. You can't speak of your faith in public. And I think that will be a big challenge for the Knights of Columbus. I think we're up to the challenge because this is in our DNA, religious freedom. This is one of the reasons why we were founded. And it has changed over time, but that's a constant. We need to be very vigilant about our first freedom, the freedom to practice our faith.
What's your, as we look forward, what is your hope for coming out of COVID, not for the church, but for the Knights? Are we going to hopefully get together for our next convention? What are you thinking on that front?
Well, we're looking at our next convention, the convention this August. I have no predictions right now what this convention will look like, but obviously we're looking at it. We're looking at the data and everything we need to make those decisions. But it's in the forefront of our mind here because we know Knights of Columbus, we're in the people business, and it's hard for us not to be together because we are, at the end of the day, we're a brotherhood and a fraternity of men and families. So we're looking at all those questions.
Supreme Knight, we've just seen a video on what we're doing about oxygen in Brazil and Peru. Extremely important, literally saving lives in a place that really needs it. How important is that particular effort for the Knights to do? But in general, what is the role of these I don't know, addressing national disasters or international disasters. How important is that for us as Knights?
Well, we always say that where there's a need, there's a knight. And this is true, whether that be in a natural disaster in the United States or Canada, flooding in Canada, or even the need for oxygen in South America. I mean, these are important needs. These are where people are suffering. And this is what we do as Knights. I mean, we help people in need. This is our charitable outreach. So I think, particularly in COVID, what you had in South America was these people they were running out of oxygen, literally the breath of life. They were running out of it. So we were able to step in and work with the dioceses there and get some oxygen and to save lives. And I think so many of our programs do that. We are in the business of changing lives and saving lives.
Great. Supreme Knight, thanks again for your time. We'll talk again next month, and we're very grateful for everything you've said to us. But before we go, let me offer you one final word.
I just want to speak to the year of St. Joseph. And I think as Knights of Columbus, it's a very, very important year for us. Obviously, we know that St. Joseph is the patron of fathers and families. So he's a very, very important saint for us. And I think we need to ask for his intercession in all the challenges that we have before us. You know, this is something that Pope Francis asked of us. In 2013, the board of directors, it was the first year of the Pope's pontificate. The board of directors met with Pope Francis, and he asked us specifically to make St. Joseph our intercessor. And he said something very, very important to us. He said that the Knights of Columbus share with St. Joseph three virtues: the virtues of quiet strength, integrity, and fidelity. And he said, and those are the virtues that the Knights of Columbus has to pass on to future generations. So to me, I think this is very, very important that we think about St. Joseph and we really pray to him in this year, because I think he's a very, very powerful saint. And I would ask our brother Knights, in this month's Columbia, we have a prayer card to St. Joseph, which is the prayer that Pope Francis says every day to St. Joseph. And I would ask our brother Knights to take that prayer card and to begin that prayer to St. Joseph every day.
So we will do that, and I hope the brother Knights take you up on that. Again, Supreme Knight Kelly, thank you so much for your time. And St. Joseph, pray for us.
Pray for us. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you. This past year, the Knights of Columbus released Into the Breach, a groundbreaking 12-episode video series that shows what it means to live as a Catholic man and the challenges of today's world. It helps men transform their lives in Christ, seek heroic virtue, and achieve greatness through God's grace. Each episode focuses on a major theme, such as masculinity, leadership, or suffering. And today we're going to take a look at the theme of life.
So I met my wife, I was playing for the Vikings. She was still in college. I'd fallen away from my faith, pretty hard at that point. My wife drugged me back to church. I mean, getting married, having kids, right? It's sort of like a reclaim the faith as my own. I want to be a great husband, and I want to be a great father. And I want my kids to have the faith as well. Football is a very spiritual game, and the locker room is a very spiritual place. And I think people are surprised to learn that. You do all these things all throughout the year, and just for a few opportunities, 10, 12, 16 games, I say it's going to bring you to your knees. So you might as well start there. And you realize that, hey, NFL, it's a good deal, it's fun, but what's real is God and Jesus Christ, and that's what's important. So my wife had always volunteered at pregnancy centers, and just quietly, she'd go, fold clothes, help out. One day my phone rang, and it was the Archbishop. But he said, "Will you come speak at the Maryland March for Life?" And I thought, well, yeah,
Our very own Baltimore Ravens, Mr. Matt Birk.
This is really cool. I mean, this is... I met a lot of women who were there who had abortions. These women have had abortions, regret it, still have that pain, and yet they're here passionately marching, fighting for the unborn, wanting to make sure that other women don't make the same mistake. But I was like, that right there is proof. I mean, if you really step back and say, wow, I mean, we allow unborn babies to be killed, right? And if we're men and we're responsible for the hearts and the minds and the souls of our wives and our kids, we have to stand up to evil. That was probably the spark that, you know, inside of me kind of lit the bonfire. Just very fortunate because of my platform to have more opportunities, stand up for the unborn and hopefully inspire others to do the same. So it's absolutely a men's issue.
We march because if you've ever seen a baby being born, even though it happens millions of times a day, it's still a miracle. It's pure joy. Don't we need more miracles? Don't we need more joy? Don't we need more love? That's why we march. And at the end of the day, there's only two choices. You're either pro-life or you're pro-abortion. And we are unapologetically pro-life. That's why we march. God bless us all.
To thrive as a family. That's the number one thing that I can do to live out our convictions. God, you've blessed me with 8 perfect children, right? And sometimes with your kids, something will happen or they'll laugh and you are 100% lost in the moment. To me, that's just a glimpse of heaven. God's given you a glimpse of heaven on earth. I've got a soft spot for kids that don't have fathers, whose fathers aren't around. And one day my wife says, I think we need to adopt. And so thought about it, prayed about it, said, yeah, okay, we'll open ourselves up to it. 2 birth mothers chose us. It's like same time, same day, and it was like, oh, all right, God, here we go again. One of the birth mothers, she didn't want to give her child up for a loving adoption, but she just said, I can't provide for this child. And she said, I just don't want people to think that I don't love this child. But it was obvious that she did. I said, it's quite the contrary. I mean, what you're doing is like the greatest act of love that I've ever witnessed. Yeah, I couldn't imagine the strength and the selflessness that takes. A lot of times we think of love as something that's like, it's Hollywood, right? Like it's warm and fuzzy and it feels good. Well, you know, love involves sacrifice. Love hurts. I mean, the greatest act of love was Jesus being crucified. That's what love looks like. From the second I held my 2 youngest sons, they're my sons. Can't imagine my life without those 2 kids. Open yourself up to God's will, and I mean, thank God we did.
We're joined now to discuss life by former NFL player and Pro Bowler Matt Birk. Matt, thanks for joining us. It's great to have you with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Great. So you've done a lot. Anyone who knows you played for the NFL. They may or may not know you've written a book. They may or may not know your involvement in the pro-life movement, but that's been massive. Now you've started a school. You're a father, you're a husband, you're a knight. So this is a show for knights. I want to start there. Tell me about being a knight. Why'd you join? What's it like being a knight from someone who's come from your background and experience?
Well, why I joined was I was actually at a men's conference in Phoenix, and Mike Phelan, who works for the Diocese of Phoenix.
I know him well. Yeah, I know him.
Yeah, he said, for those of you that aren't knights, why not? And that's a powerful question, right? Like, why not? Why aren't you doing this or why aren't you, or why? So I said, well, I have no good answer to that, right? And of course, had known about the Knights, had seen the Knights my entire life. But I just retired from football and so decided to just really look into the organization and see what the Knights are all about. And, it doesn't take long to figure out that if I'm a Catholic man, I should be involved in the Knights because the Knights make it really easy for me to put my faith in action. And, we're all guilty of this, of talking. And sometimes we can almost feel like talking actually does something, but it doesn't. Right. And so through our Catholic faith, I think we all know the good, but what's important is that you do the good. And it's powerful. It's powerful to be part of an organization that a couple million men belong to, right? That says something. I'm a big team guy in my football career, and being part of something bigger than yourself, it's powerful spiritually, and it makes me better.
In the Catholic tradition, we talk about this virtue called magnanimity, which means the pursuit of greatness or being great-souled. And one of the pieces of it is that it's in pursuing what God wants you to do, pursuing that greatness, that you actually find happiness. And I think one of the interesting things about your story is you were at the pinnacle. You were playing professional football. You joke about everyone in your hometown knew who you were. You had a hamburger named after you. You had everything, right? But you said there was something missing. You weren't fully happy. Tell me a little bit about that and why pursuing Christ was the answer to that.
Yeah, well, I knew deep down that joy was absent from my life. And it was because I was living for the world. I was living for myself. I kind of bought into what our culture says, that like we're here to consume, right? Ultimately I was only focused on myself and what I could accomplish and what I could attain. And that's not what we're made for, listen, I mean, we're all human beings, so we're all broken. At the end of the day, none of us are really that smart. When we could screw up a free lunch, which I did. And so I guess, they say, obviously nobody knows you like how God knows you, and he's not going to give you anything more than you can handle. So he must not think very highly of me, because instead of some, huge adversity or crisis, in my life, he said, well, I'm going to give you everything that you want, Oh yeah. I had it made by the world's standards, but I was dying on the inside, and I knew it. I knew long-term, if I didn't change, if something didn't change, it was going to go real badly for me real quick.
What was the catalyst? What made that change happen? Was there a particular catalyst, or?
I don't think there was I didn't have this Saul-like moment where I was knocked from the horse and blinded, but a couple things. I mean, one, I met a woman who I became rather smitten with, and she became my wife. And then it just seemed like there were men, a number of men older than me, men who I looked up to for different reasons. I mean, mostly looked up to because it seemed like they kind of had it all together. And then as I got to know these men and dug a little deeper, I found out that it wasn't because of their jobs or because of their wives. It was because of their Catholic faith. That's what emanated from them. And it was like, oh, so it was like the power of attraction. It was like, well, I want to be like these guys. And I can kind of relate to St. Augustine in a way, where it's like, I've tried everything else. I've tried to fill my heart with everything else. I might as well try God. It's the last thing. Okay, what the heck, right? And that's my story. And it's still, I think it's still a process. And we're going 20 years ago, really, where I kind of started the journey back to claim my Catholic faith as my own. And I'm still on the journey, right? And that's the frustrating yet perfectly beautiful thing about our faith, is that, we're never going to be done. You're never going to get it all. You're never going to be in that spot where you just I think hit it on cruise control and just ride off into the sunset, right? It's going to be this beautiful, joyful struggle from now until the day we die and we're called home.
What are the keys to keeping the struggle going, right? How do you maintain that? There's the up and downs. If you're like me, you're frequently disappointed with yourself as many times as you're inspired by those around you. And if I'm not, my wife reminds me to be that way, so it works out just fine. So what's the key to getting back up, to saying, Lord, am I really confessing this again? Here I am again. What keeps you going?
Frequent disappointment of self. Yes, that's so true. Again, I'll kind of use a football analogy, but it's just going back to the fundamentals over and over and over. In football, every single day we did the same drills. I practiced snapping the football. We'd practice our footwork. We'd practice our handwork. We do these every single day, no matter if you were first day rookie or a 15-year veteran who made Pro Bowls, because the fundamentals never change. And so you look at our faith, right? Obviously prayer has to be at the center. And then the sacraments, you know, going to mass, receiving the Eucharist, going to confession, which none of us ever was like, oh, I hate going to confession. Who likes going to confession? Nobody, right? Who always says, oh, I have so much time. I have so much time I could pray the rosary every day. You know, everybody struggles with, quote, finding the time for the rosary, adoration, you know, studying the lives of the saints. You know, we have the, if you will, I think we have the answers to the test right in front of us. But sometimes part of our humanity is that we overcomplicate things, and we think, well, it must be harder than that, or there must be a secret or whatever. There are no secrets. It's all right there. And that's the beauty of our church.
You know, one of the things you brought up earlier, and I just want to go back to, is the importance of other brothers to do this. Because it's one thing to get yourself to confession, and it's rough. But when you go with your brothers and you're deciding, let's all do this, let's read the Bible together. You've been on teams your whole life. Tell me, even now, okay, so you're not on a team anymore. Do you have a set of brothers that you do things with? Is that key to your spiritual life right now? Oh,
Yes. About 3 years ago, I you know, it was a total God thing, but started this men's group, and it's, you know, we sit around, we meet every week. We've done the Into the Breach videos that the Knights did, which is absolutely fantastic.
Thanks for being in them, by the way. Really appreciate it.
Well, yeah, no, that one was a little bit embarrassing to watch, because we would watch them on Saturday mornings. That one I took a little ribbing for, but that's all right. You know, we'll do things like, you know, like Exodus 90. We do a retreat we find these things to do together. And the fact that we do them together, I think, makes all the difference. I think God made us for fraternity. There's something about men gathering, about men sharing their struggles. You know, we all have the same struggles, being vulnerable.
So one of the challenges is when you speak honestly about having a big family, being married, to someone who isn't, part of what you're doing is getting rid of illusions, right? Like, this is not the romantic comedy you read. This is a real life. It's tough. You're jumping in. But to an age that isn't getting married, we're seeing less and less of our young people actually deciding to get married. We also have to articulate, but this is a great adventure. This is a great joy. There's nothing as satisfying, at least in my life, as being a husband and a dad. Do you experience it that way?
100%. 100%. Yes, I could tell you all day how hard it is, and not just physically and emotionally and spiritually. Like, I'm exhausted at the end of every day. But there's also that's a great feeling. You know, it's like there's nothing better than walking off the football field just exhausted and victorious. You know, or I should say, walking off the practice field when it was. After just a great practice, and nobody knew about it, right? There's no fans at practice, but you're like, man, I put in a good, honest day's work. I feel like that's what being a husband and a father allows me to do, to have that satisfaction. And it's never perfect. Nobody's perfect. You know, I make it real clear. We are not okay, after dinner, everybody get on your knees and family rosary time. You know, that's not my family. There are families that are like that. And I look at them and I'm like in awe. You know, right now at this stage, we are not that family. We are survival. We're in survival. You know, we go from 18 to 4. I mean, we are just trying to survive. 3 teenage daughters. It's mayhem. A lot of days you lay in bed with my wife. Granted that we both stay awake long enough to talk for 5 minutes. And it's like, wow, you know, there's a lot going on here. And we took some L's today, but we're also, our motto is to struggle joyfully and to always remember that. Speaking of our country and some of the things, I know you've also done a lot with the pro-life movement. You're on our episode of Into the Breach, talking about life, et cetera. It would seem that we're walking into an era where defending life is getting more fraught, we could say. It's getting a little more difficult. Speaking of character, we're Knights of Columbus. We're all about life. What are the character of a knight as we step into the front lines, even more so in the pro-life movement, religious freedom? What would you say to your brothers? What do you say to us? Hey, this is where we're going, man. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, listen, it's always been, the Catholic Church has always led the pro-life movement. And the Knights have been those on the front of the front lines leading this movement. And we can sit here and lament the fact that to most of us, it seems ridiculous that every human being does not have the right to life. Like, why are we talking about all this other stuff if we can't get this right? But as Catholics, and specifically as Knights, this is just what we do. You know, like, we don't even think about it. You know, some people, oh, I don't want to speak up. You know, I'm nervous. I'm afraid. What? That's not us. That's not us.
Yeah.
Quick story. You know, when I didn't go to the White House in 2013, because then President Barack Obama was the first sitting president to address Planned Parenthood, and he said, "God bless Planned Parenthood," and it made news. I bet since then there's been 1 million people have come up to me and said, "Hey, thanks for doing that." And I always say, "Well, I'm glad you feel the same way." You know, like, let's encourage each other. It's kind of this, you know, maybe kind of, "Hey, thanks for doing that," kind of quietly. We don't need to hide it. We don't need to be quiet about it. Nobody's ever come up to me and said anything counter, you know? And so this idea that if you speak up, you're gonna, whatever, cancel culture, you're gonna encounter resistance. I don't know. I think a lot of that is built up into more than what it is. And there's a lot more people kind of on our side than we might be led to believe. And so, you know, we were created. We just talked about how interesting of a time in history this is because we're living in it. Well, we were created for just for a time like this. And I think that the pro-life movement, the pro-life fight, is one that we're being called to participate in.
You know, one of the things that I took out of your book, and maybe this can be our last question, is one of the choices was to be strong enough to ask for guidance. And I think as men, we understand what that means. We don't like asking directions, et cetera. We don't like asking for help. But here's the question for you. I mean, get over that, men. I get that. But how do you find a guide, right? What have you seen, Matt, in your own life that says that's a man I want to ask his advice as opposed to that man? What kind of things do you see, or how does the Lord bring that and brought that into your life?
We used to have a great saying when I was at the Ravens, you know, John Harbaugh, who's one of my heroes, who's a guy. That's why I left everything I knew, my family and everything in Minnesota, went and played for Baltimore, because I was like, this is a man, you know, this is a guy that I want to be under his guidance. I want to be under his coaching, but I want to be under his guidance. You know, we were talking about faith and family and all these things. He used to always say, you know, after we go through the film and we would nitpick and we would yell, and, you know, you get yelled and screamed at for screwing stuff up. Sometimes you'd watch the film, you'd be like, geez, did we win? Like, it feels like we lost 100-0, but we'd win the game, right? And he'd be like, hey guys, it wasn't perfect, but it was us, you know? And there's something about that. Like, it's never going to be perfect. We're always going to strive and try to be, you know, chase perfection to achieve excellence. But yeah, I think you have to be open to that. And for some guys, it's really hard. I mean, I can only relate it to football. Is a lot of guys super talented. They come in and they certainly had everything they needed to play in the NFL, but they could not take coaching. They couldn't understand, you know, that they needed to get better. Somehow they just couldn't deal with that. And it ended up costing them their careers. I mean, you saw it all the time. And so we talk about magnanimity, you know, to strive for greatness, but also to be humble, and not to do it for yourself. I mean, that's not a flip the switch and one-time thing. I mean, that's a daily thing where you have to be willing to take that. And again, don't say, oh, it's just really hard. It's hard for everybody. You know what? I don't know. I'll leave you with kind of one last saying, how hard things are. And this is John Harbaugh'ism again. Nobody cares. Work harder. And you know what? We can do that as Christian men, as Catholic men. I'd like to think we can do that. We can work harder, because nobody works as hard. Nobody does more stuff in the world, the corporal works of mercy, than we do as a collective group. And I know that I can do more, that I can work harder.
That's a perfect way to end, Matt. Thank you very much for that. Hey, thanks for taking the time. I hope down the road we can do this again. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks.
I would love to. Thank you very much.
If you'd like to watch all the episodes of Into the Breach, they're free and available to everyone at kfc.org/intothebreach. There you can also find a companion study guide for the series to aid small group discussions or for your personal reflection. Please also consider having your council hold the Faith in Action Into the Breach program to help your brother knights and the men of your parish step into the breach. Each month, our Supreme Chaplain, Archbishop Laurie, presents a reflection and challenge for Knights to live during that month. The Supreme Chaplain's monthly challenge is a great way for Knights to put perseverance into practice and grow in faith and fraternity. It's an opportunity for Brother Knights to come together and for iron to sharpen iron. Here's Archbishop Laurie to issue his monthly challenge for the upcoming month of April.
Dear Brother Knights, for my Supreme Chaplain's monthly challenge to Knights for the upcoming month of April, the scripture passage comes from the Gospel reading for Mass on Sunday, April 18th. While they were still speaking about this, he stood in their midst and said to them, "Peace be with you." But they were startled and terrified and thought they were seeing a ghost. Then he said to them, "Why are you troubled? Why do questions arise in your hearts? Look at my hands and my feet, that it is myself." After Jesus rose from the dead, the apostles were confused and afraid. But showing them his wounds, Jesus proved to them his identity. Whenever we find ourselves confused or afraid, let us remember that Christ is risen, that it was by his wounds we are healed. If Christ had not suffered and died, he could not have risen from the dead. Without Good Friday, there would be no Easter Sunday. May we unite our sufferings to Christ's, rejoicing always in his resurrection and basing our lives on his peace and presence among us. This coming month, ideally on Good Friday, I challenge you to visit your local parish and to pray the Stations of the Cross. Secondly, I challenge you to participate in the Faith in Action Good Friday Family Promotion Program to aid your fellow parishioners in remembering Christ's passion in anticipation of his resurrection. As you undertake this monthly challenge, I ask you to reflect. When you are suffering, do you tend to find yourself forgetting God, or do you find yourself drawing closer to him? What does it mean to offer it up when we are suffering? How does the reality of Christ's resurrection offer us comfort, peace, and hope during the trials and tribulations of this life? God bless you as you take up this monthly challenge. Vivat Jesus.
For our founder, Father McGivney, to be declared blessed last year, a miracle was needed. In 2015, the Schachle family needed a miracle, and in that need, they turned to the intercession of Father McGivney. Here's what happened.
Daniel said he wanted a large family, but I never planned to have 13 children. I just said yes, one baby at a time.
I started with the Knights in 2005, and I decided I would look into being a Knights of Columbus insurance agent after reading Parish Priest, because I really felt like coming into this business, I have to be an apostle of Father McGivney, that we take care of Catholic families. It was December 31st, baby number 13, that we had the ultrasound that revealed the Down syndrome. I told Michelle, I said, what a blessing for our children to be able to grow up around someone like that. We were advised to get some additional testing done. They pulled the ultrasound up on the screen, showing us how his body looked like it was completely full of fluid, like a little balloon. He said, well, he has fetal hydrops diagnosis. This is going to be terminal. I kind of just had an agony in the garden moment. I said, Father McGivney, if you will pray for him, then we will change his name, and I will name him after you.
I just kept thinking, Lord, let this baby be the miracle. If he's Father McGivney's miracle, then he will live.
Every year, the Knights of Columbus puts on an incentive trip for their agents. So in January of 2014, it was announced that we were going with a pilgrimage to Fatima.
Daniel and I asked all of our friends that were close to please pray through the intercession of Father McGivney on the day that we were in Fatima.
The reading of the day, it just hit us both pretty hard. Jesus says to the man that comes and asks him to heal his son, "Go forth, your son will live." I remember looking at Michelle with my mouth hanging open, thinking, wow, how powerful is that?
Physically, I felt like a veil was lifted. The brokenness in my heart was softened. And then we came home, and I went to the appointment to see where the baby was.
The doctor came in and read the ultrasound, and everything looked like a normal Down syndrome baby. That is the moment where you have to acknowledge that something has happened here that was miraculous.
I think there are times in your life you think you've seen a miracle. But when somebody tells you that you have, it's even more special. And he is a miracle in a lot of ways. But he came to the right family.
God chooses the miracles. God chooses who is beatified. He chooses who is canonized. He wants Father McGivney to be honored, and so he shall be.
We have the pleasure of having with us the father of Michael "Mikey" Schachle and the Knights of Columbus General Agent, Daniel Schachle. Daniel, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you, Dr. Reyes. It's great to be here.
I've seen that video a number of times, probably 10 times, and something always sticks out to me. This time what stuck out to me in the story is your own words in which you said, God writes the best stories, and somehow it's only when you look back that you see it. Tell me more about that. Like, what is it like to be in the story and then to look back and see it?
So I think that all of us can look back on our lives and see things like this where God pushed us in a direction that we weren't expecting and maybe at the time was painful or a struggle across to bear. We found out in November that we were pregnant of 2014, and we were pretty excited about that. We told the children at Christmas time that they were going to have another sibling. And then we found out on New Year's Eve that Michael was going to have Down syndrome. Actually, at the time, we were calling him Benedict, but that he was going to have Down syndrome, which can be looked at as another cross or a hardship, right? A lot of times Down syndrome children have heart problems, different physical defects, different challenges that they have to work through as they grow up. And as a family, you have to help them work through that. So it could be looked at as a challenge or a cross, but it can also be looked at as a gift because you have the opportunity then to help someone that needs you. You have the opportunity to love someone that can never give back to you. And we were actually kind of excited that we were going to have a Down syndrome child in our family and what it would do for all of our other children to grow up around someone like that. So we were really looking at it as a blessing. And about a week later, I went to a Knights of Columbus General Agents meeting. We had a speaker there that told the story of his own family's history, and it echoes back to what we were talking about. We look at things in our lives that happened that at the time we thought were bad, but it turned out to be a great blessing in the future, that God was pushing us in a different direction. And that was the whole topic of his talk, was lacking the knowledge of God. Why would we question why bad things happen? So I thought that was reinforcing that Michael was a gift, or Benedict was a gift, but I think it was really just prepping us for our next step in our journey on this thing, which was a diagnosis that he had a 0% chance of survival. And that's really some of the words I fell back on whenever we got that diagnosis was lacking the knowledge of God. We have no reason to question why this is happening. So even that, whoever set up that speaker, I think was part of this story to give us the strength and the grace that we needed to deal with what was coming on.
When you knew a miracle happened, take me to that moment. What was that like? Was it doubt? Like, wait a minute, this can't be right? Was it overwhelming joy? What's it like to know a miracle just happened?
So again, we go back to grace. I think my wife and I dealt with the whole diagnosis thing in different ways. For some reason, some illogical reason, I never really was accepting of the fact that he was going to die. You know, my attitude when people would say, no one's ever survived this, I would always say, well, somebody has to eventually. Why can't it be him? You know, so I was never really accepting of the diagnosis to begin with. And I really saw this as a real pro-life moment too, since we were advised that we could have an abortion, and it really wasn't an abortion because there was no hope. So I was a little bit frustrated for being told that, when I knew deep down inside, it doesn't matter if you tell me there's no hope or not, it's still an abortion, right? So, you know, I never really had that thought that he was going to die, and I figured I would deal with that when it happened. So when we went to Europe, we had an ultrasound right before we left so that my wife could travel and make sure that we thought that Benedict would live until we got back. When we got back, we had another ultrasound scheduled to show if he was still alive or not. So when the doctor came in after the ultrasound and sat down with my wife, and she was telling them, look, we got to meet the NICU doctors, we've got to meet the cardiologists, sometimes these babies have heart problems, and just started going through the afterbirth plan. And Michelle stopped her and said, what are you talking about? I was told that there was no hope. I wasn't going to have a baby, you know? And so Dr. Mary flipped back through the charts and said, are you the lady that just went to Fatima? And she said, yeah. She said, well, now you're going to have a baby. There's a little bit of liquid on one lung, but that's normal for babies. Looks completely normal now. So that was the moment when we really found out. And it was just as shocking to the doctor. When she read the ultrasound, she didn't have any idea that Michael had a 0% chance of living, because our first diagnosis was with a different doctor in the clinic. So this was the first time we had ever seen her. And St. Peter is my patron saint. So my immediate reaction to the miracle was a prayer of, depart from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man. You know, when God shows up like that, it kind of, it's very heavy.
Hey, brother, it's been great to see you. It's good to see you again. Thanks for sharing your story.
Thank you, Dr. Hayes.
We'll see you. Since his beatification last year, more and more people have learned of the power of Father McGivney's intercession, and many have reported favors. Here's a look at how you can submit your own prayer intentions at fathermcgivney.org.
Blessed Father McGivney.
Today is March 25th, the Feast of the Assumption, which every year is also the Knights of Columbus Day of the Unborn Child. Looking back to the March for Life in January, this year's march was held as it never was before, largely virtually. Although participation in the annual event was different, the message of the dignity of every human life was the same, and Knights throughout the United States continued their support of this event.
Today is the first ever virtual march and rally for life. We have a group of pro-life leaders and representatives who are going to be marching together for the unborn and for all the people that they represent back home who are joining us virtually.
I know people are logged in across the country to watch, really the hundreds of thousands who would love to be here with us. We're here to represent them.
The Knights of Columbus are the backbone of the March for Life. We work in tandem, making decisions. It's hard to imagine the March for Life still happening if it weren't for the Knights of Columbus.
We're here at St. Anne's Basilica to enjoy this March for Life virtually. We're still here, we're protecting life and supporting life, and as a Knight, that's paramount.
We're about a bunch of guys who care about our unborn children, and we're doing everything we can to help whenever we can. It's that simple.
We're at St. Augustine's Catholic Church, right outside of the University of Florida. Knights of Columbus are in charge of holding the live stream and handing out events and making sure people are coming out in support of the defense of life.
If we don't stand up for life, then frankly, what can we stand up for? Life is the fundamental value. If we don't defend life, then we can't defend anything else.
The Knights of Columbus are the heroes of the March for Life. They show up in person today and they're keeping us safe. And they've also just given so generously to support our work in fighting for life.
Each of us, way back from the beginning of the pro-life movement, has known we are on a lifetime's journey. The direction of that journey does not bend. It does not waver, though sometimes it may slow down. But in the end, our pro-life journey has a destination. And that, my friends, is victory.
I'm now joined by Jeanne Mancini, President of the March for Life Education and Defense Fund. Jeanne, thanks for taking some time to speak with us today. It's been quite a year. We look forward to hearing from you. It's great to have you.
It sure has. Thanks so much for having me, Jonathan.
Where are we at in the pro-life movement right now? Give me your assessment. Nothing seems normal, so tell me what we should be thinking about the pro-life movement right now.
Okay, well, we've made so many gains, Jonathan. I mean, so many when you consider sort of the broader landscape. You look back to the height of people self-identifying as being pro-choice. So if we're going to look at the court of public opinion, which is important for some reasons, we've seen that move in the direction of life so much. So when we look at the late 1980s, early 1990s, people were more pro-choice. The large majority of people identified as being quote unquote pro-choice. Today, when you ask those questions, and depending on how you ask those questions, what we're seeing is that more and more people are on the side of life. They sort of, the way that they say that might be different in the sense of, do you think that abortion should have more restrictions, or, is the law in our country a little bit too wide open, et cetera. But as you well know, the Knights have done some great polling on this. The large majority of Americans for over a decade would limit abortion at most to the first 3 months of pregnancy. And so that's one way that we're winning in the court of public opinion. We're winning with young people, which is so important because young people are really, not only the future of the church, but they are the future of the pro-life movement. I just can't wait to pass the baton on, as many of us, I think, feel, in our 40s and 50s, because young people, St. John Paul II would call them the best ambassadors for life, and they truly are. But so if you look at, for example, the General Social Survey, which is the government's longitudinal, very academically rigorous study the single demographic cohort that has changed the most in the direction of life is the youngest cohort, which is 18 to 29-year-olds. So they've moved most drastically from being proclaimed, pro-choicers or pro-abortion advocates to being the most pro-life, wanting the most protection for the unborn. So we're winning with young people. We're winning in the court of public opinion, or certainly making strides in the court of public opinion. We're also, when you look at pregnancy care centers versus abortion clinics, boy, what a change there too. I mentioned sort of the height of people self-identifying as pro-choice in our country. Around that same time was when we had the most abortion clinics in our country. About 500 abortion clinics. I'm sorry, I take that back. At that time, there were approximately 2,000 abortion clinics in the country. So this is the late 1980s, early 1990s. Today, that number is down by around 700. So that has decreased significantly. Whereas the reverse, pregnancy care centers, like so many of the good programs that the Knights of Columbus fund with their ultrasounds, back during that same time frame, the late 80s, the early 90s, were at about 500. They were called crisis pregnancy centers, but today they're well over 3,000. And these, centers provide all sorts of resources for men and women facing unexpected pregnancies. So we've also had all sorts of great incremental laws passed at the level of the state, and I could go on and on. So there are so many ways that we're winning, Jonathan, in terms of, the lay of the land with pro-life issues. And yet, I say that with a lot of fear and trepidation, because we know that we've got almost 800,000 or a little over 800,000 abortions happening still every year in our country. And so our work before us is certainly daunting, and it's not like we can be celebrating. There's a lot of work to be done. We have an unfriendly administration right now, et cetera. And yet we've made so many strides.
So a lot of our guys would have normally been out here for the march, and for good reason. We had to do it virtually. But what can they expect next year, barring another pandemic or something? What are your goals? What are you aiming for?
Absolutely, to be in person. I have to say, a lot of nights were still there this year because we still needed marshals. And we had, nearly 100 marshals that were supporting the 50-some leaders that were marching. So those nights are just incredible. So we had, I think, more nights than leaders that were there this year marching, which was just, again, incredible. But next year, we plan to be back in full force. And we hope and pray that all of you are with us.
Great. And when do we get to hear the theme for next year? When does that get decided?
That's usually debuted in the fall. So this year, the first time ever, we did a virtual theme debut because of COVID. We typically do it on the Hill and have kind of a fun media splash around it, have some speakers address some of the content of the theme. So depending on what's happening in the fall, I'd love to be able to do it in person and with a big virtual component now. We can take some of what we've learned from this COVID year and take it into the future.
Jeanne, well, we look forward to hearing it. We thank you for your great work. We love working with you, and we're praying that the tens of thousands are here next January for the march. Thanks for your great work, and thanks for taking time to be here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. We are so grateful to the Knights.
Great. We'll see you. Thanks, Jeanne. Before we close, we wanted to bring you the story of Michigan Technological University Council's 17237 and a unique way they've helped bring the Mass to their community.
Something about the Ice Chapel draws people in to come revisit their faith or discover something that's been missing. And if it takes snow and ice to get them here, then we'll do it.
We're in the midst of Winter Carnival, which is a big annual celebration at Michigan Tech University. And one of the things we've been doing now for a few years is building an ice chapel. We build this big chapel out of ice and snow, and then on the Friday of Winter Carnival, we celebrate a number of ice masses.
The Knights of Columbus have been very fortunate to be able to help out. We just like to be present and give an avenue for people to discover their faith, especially for young men.
We really dug deep into it, and we really helped and supported St. Al's as much as we could by hosting build sessions and getting as many guys from our council as possible to help build.
We have the walls. We built an altar that some guys went and got some ice off of the bay for, and then we've made pews this year.
We've been refining and doing new things every year with it, and all across the country, people hear about it. It always goes on the internet.
And it's turned out to be, liturgically last year, I think we had more people attend ice masses than we did any other weekend of the year. Somehow, it just like lowers the threshold for people to maybe take that step back to the church, or back to the faith in some way.
Men are looking to expand, grow deeper in their faith, and they see us witness to that, and they want to be part of it.
I think everybody should be a Knight, right? Because it's a great opportunity to really spread the Catholic faith to the greater community.
Brothers, thank you for joining us for this episode of Nightcast. Once again, to register for upcoming episodes, simply visit kfc.org/Nightcast. And please encourage your brother Knights to do the same. In our next episode, we'll be taking a closer look at the St. John Paul II National Shrine. The shrine was started as an answer to St. John Paul II's call for new evangelization. It's a place of worship, religious formation, and cultural renewal. It's really an incredible place. We love filming from there, and we look forward to sharing it with you. We'll also be taking another look at Into the Breach with an interview with Ryan Young, who was featured in the evangelization episode, on just what exactly evangelization is and how to actually do it. Also, brothers, if you have thoughts, suggestions, or comments on Nightcast, we'd love to hear them. This show is only as good as you help us make it. Just send an email to nightcast@kfc.org. Thanks again. Vivat Jesu.